Endless spells that can drown everything, the master of magic, the cult worshipper of cunning, the destroyer of the galaxy, the slave of the magical empire, the illegitimate son of the magical goddess, and the legendary spellcaster Imric traveling through the world of Feren. Imric begins his journey with a high-dimensional product from another plane group, and the Endless Book, which possesses infinite magical power that can bestow upon its users, says, "You pretend to be yours, I'll help you. Keep it safe." Keywords: D&D, Feren, infinite spell position, all heavens, Mage Lord, absolute neutrality, calm. Keywords of the novel: Master of Spells starting from Fern. No pop-ups, complete collection download of Master of Spells starting from Fern TXT, latest chapter reading of Master of Spells starting from Fern. Chapter 1. Endless Book. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Endless Book. This is a 2-story small wizard tower made of wood, with a large green field in front of the door. It is probably not accurate to say that it is a wizard tower because it is just a pointed wooden building that imitates the appearance of the wizard tower. The owner of the tower may be a small second-level mage, carrying the dream of having a real mage tower that he saw while traveling in Deepwater City. For most ordinary people in Fern, magic is a distant rumor, and perhaps those aristocratic gentlemen have the opportunity to overlook the lower-level mages who act as adventurers. Therefore, the villagers in this small half-moon village have always been filled with awe towards the wizard tower on the edge of the cliff 3 miles away. They had never seen the owner of that small tower appear in the village, but their strong curiosity always prompted them to explore the secret of the caster, the object their parents used to scare them when they were disobedient from a young age. Every 4 or 5 days, travelers from the distant town of Shallow Water or Buck City will pass by the Mage Tower and then enter the village. Sometimes, the owner of the Mage Tower also comes forward to welcome the merchants inside, purchasing some food and strange ingredients. At this time, the villagers in the village would excitedly inquire about the true face of the master tower owner in the local tavern, as well as what strange things he had bought. And this is also the only pleasure they can find in their boring and ordinary life of working at sunrise and resting at sunset. Imric is the owner of this small wizard tower, or rather, in the depths of his soul, he occasionally remembers his former name. Ching Fong. That's right, Imric was once a small space traveler in a very distant plane group. In the place he once called his hometown, humanity is the sole ruler on the planet known as Earth. But in that universe, there was a terrifying existence called containment, and Imric, unfortunately, knew one of them. On that small blue planet, humans have been breeding for 25,000 years, and only 4,000 years are meaningful. Why? Because 4,000 years ago, everything in the world was an unknown and infinite fear to us. And containment is the embodiment of this infinite fear. The scientific researchers who have studied them have said, they are loopholes in the universe, pranks of high-dimensional organisms. They are born in the universe, but higher than the universe. Containers are such an unscientific existence. Imric was a member of the organization that controlled these shelters before crossing over. His last mission was an indestructible magical spell book, which was a rare and side-effect-free shelter. But unexpectedly, the lucky person who held this containment item was not willing to hand it over to the organization for management. In the end, he even attempted to activate a cross-plane teleportation spell using that book, but Imric killed him before the spell took effect and obtained the spell book. Unfortunately, the spell came into effect, and this powerful spell took Imric across the distant multiverse, even across a vast group of planes, to another vast group of planes beyond infinity, belonging to the hometown set in this spell book. After getting up from his small wooden bed, Imric looked in the mirror. In the mirror, the person had long silver hair, deep black eyes, and a slender figure. Despite being lazy to take care of himself due to long-term research in magic, he could still see the exquisite and handsome face beneath the messy silver hair. He picked up a black and red spell book beside him. The spell book of the Coast Wizard Society. Imric gave it a fitting name. Endless Book. This is a spell book that instinctively gives users unlimited power and supreme skills in spells. The book is black-red in color, with a gold border decorated with golden stripes on the cowhide cover on the front, and the English word, drive, printed in the middle. On the bottom right corner of the back, there is the full name of the publishing house, Coast Wizard Society, and its price tag, $59. When the user touches it, the characteristics of this container will be presented in their mind. Feature 1. Undameable. The spell book of the Coast Wizards has the basic characteristics of the vast majority of shelters, and cannot be destroyed by any known means. It is immune to all energy transformations and damage. 2. Infinite book pages. The thickness of the book is 11 centimeters, but upon opening it, you will find that the number of pages can increase infinitely, and the torn spell pages will not disappear. 3. Unrestricted spell positions. Any spell book owner transcribed in this book has unlimited spell positions for that spell, without the need for prior memory, and can be released at will. 4. Unrestricted casting. The owner of this book will have the ability to cast spells in any area without magic, such as the dead magic web and the no magic web zone. If there is no magic web in that area or world, the Coast Wizard will create a magic book based on the holder's point, imitating the magic web set in the D&D setting. The magic web generation takes no time, the area is circular, and the expansion speed exceeds the speed of light. Generally, the expansion area of the magic web will only be determined based on the farthest distance of the magic impact released by the owner. 5. Unrestricted mysterious skills. The owner of this book cannot learn any skills related to spells, such as various super magic feats. But when the caster's level reaches the level equivalent to that of a mage's level 9 casting profession on the planet of Toriel, this feature will give the caster the ability to use any arcane skill without restriction or cost, such as using super magic without the need for ring up. 6. Exemption from casting conditions. The owner of a spell book does not need to pay any negative cost or casting materials when releasing any spells. 7. Fantasy spell casting. Every natural year, the owner of the spell book can randomly learn a supernatural ability that conforms to the concept of magic in Earth fantasy without being taught. All active supernatural abilities learned through this feature are released 3 times a day. 8. Spell casting generalists. Book owners who hold spell books ignore the learning conditions and restrictions of any spell. As long as the skill book owner meets the concept of spell in Earth fantasy, they can quickly learn, including divine spells, psychic powers, witchcraft, etc. Restriction. The holder of this book must have a casting profession that conforms to the traditional sense in order to activate all features. I would like to mention that the Golden Finger of Haben book was written on the first page, so those with a foundation in online literature will know that this is a relatively invincible novel. Therefore, if you read it later, it means that you accept it. Don't say that the hanging is too big or something like that. There are too many people and explanations are too tiring, so I will put it on the first page. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Second Ring Spell. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Second Ring Spell. Imric, who had just arrived, found himself transported to the body of a second-level mage, and as he did in Rome, he also used his original name. After accepting his original memory in class level, Imric shrank inside this small wizard tower and lived a life of isolation from the world. This is also related to his own personality. After all, he was a cautious or frugal person before traveling, so after arriving in this world, he simply dared not travel based on his original memories. He was originally a poor mage, and it was the norm for most low-level mages in Fei Luan. As a second-level mage, he only copied 8 spells, 3 first-ring spells, and 1 second-ring spell. They are Trick, Detective Magic, Reading Magic, Trembling Electric Shock, Dance Light Art, Mage's Hand, Frost Ray, Communication Art, Boost Resistance. 1-ring spell. Shield Spell, Magic Missile, Charming Human second-ring spell. wind-making technique in this universe called the Kingdom Universe. The magical web of the goddess of magic covers the vast majority of places, and mages release spells through contact with the magical web memory. The spell level is divided into 9 levels, and a first-level mage can memorize and release 6 spells and 2 first-level spells per day. Starting from level 1, each even level increases the current number of spell positions, while each odd level can learn spells from a higher level. Therefore, as a small second-level mage, Imric only has 6 spells and 3 first-ring spell slots. Fortunately, Imric's intelligence attribute is 16, so with the reward of intelligence, Imric can delve deeper into arcane magic and have 5 first-ring spell positions. And that second-ring spell, Imric has no ability to release memories at all. Fortunately, I have this endless book, which allows me to have unlimited spell slots. Imric gently caressed the cover of the storage box. The third ability of the Endless Book allows Imric to infinitely utilize the ability to transcribe from books without the need for prior memory. For example, an ordinary mage needs to choose to memorize the spells he needs to use today after waking up every day, and the number of spell slots is limited. Therefore, if a mage has the ability to learn more spells than his number of spell slots, he should carefully choose which spells he needs to memorize today. After a spell is released, it needs to be memorized again before it can be used, while mages need to rest for 8 hours to restore their spell position. Therefore, for the vast majority of Fei Luan's mages, their biggest challenge has always been not enough spell space and what spells they need to memorize every day. Fortunately, for Imric, these issues do not exist. As long as he transcribes his spells in his endless book, all spells can be used infinitely. Therefore, after understanding all the abilities of the mage, he immediately copied all the spells and first-ring spells he had mastered. The only second-ring spell, due to insufficient level, could only temporarily give up copying and save it in his predecessor's old spell book. For the past 2 years, there were caravans passing by from Xionglu City every month. Whenever they arrived, Imric would sell them a set of spell scroll magic missiles and enchanting humans he had made, and purchase the experimental materials he needed. Due to concerns about suspicion from the caravan, Imric only sells 150 scrolls per month, each priced at 10 gold coins and costing 5 gold coins. Therefore, Imric can save 750 gold coins each month for daily expenses. In the world of Feren, the world of commoners and spellcasters is divided. While purchasing experimental materials may cost most of these 750 gold coins, the amount spent on purchasing food each month is only about 20 gold coins. And this is still the expense that Imric is used to spending a lot of money on. Today is also the time for the caravan passing by on the first day of each month. After a day of meditation and contact with the magic web, Imric moved out his small stool and sat at the wooden door of the mage's tower, blowing the humid and hot sea breeze. Waiting for the arrival of distant crowds. When the sun was about to set, the silhouette of the distant caravan finally appeared under the afterglow of the setting sun. Imric stood up to greet them and said, "Hi, my friend, has the malachite I booked last week been found yet?" The distant caravan approached, and the leader, a powerful man wearing heavy armor, waved and said, "Old John has kept it for you. Go ask him for it." An old man wearing a blue robe walked out of the caravan and pushed his glasses, saying with a smile, "Oh, Imric, this is the malachite you want, a total of 800 gold coins. Here are 150 scrolls for this month. After deducting this malachite, there are still 700 gold coins left. I will give you another 50 gold coins, but I still need 150 scrolling materials." Imric recited a few incantations and made a spell-casting gesture with the mage's hand. A large, blue and transparent hand instantly appeared, grabbing a sack filled with spell scrolls and lifting it to the ground in front of Old John. Old John lowered his head and counted the number of scrolls, then looked up for a long time and exclaimed, "You're too competitive, Imric. As a level 4 mage, I have a suggestion for you. You only have a maximum of 150 spell slots per month, and all of them are used to make scrolls. How should you practice them normally? As a mage, Gold coins are important, but you should always keep your spell slots for unknown situations. Imric smiled lightly and thought to himself, I only took 3 days to complete these scrolls. If it weren't for fear that you might find something wrong, I could make a ruthless scroll production machine. For ordinary mages, copying scrolls not only requires effort and time to depict spell models, but more importantly, every time a spell scroll is created, it consumes 1 spell slot for that spell. Therefore, if Imric didn't use the endless book, he would only be able to make 150 scrolls a month at most, using 5 magic spell slots per day to memorize magical missiles and enchant humans. Old John's advice is certainly correct for a normal mage, but for Imric, who cheats by relying on shelter, it can only be said that people are more infuriating than people. Old John sent someone to put away the scroll, stopped, and after exchanging some spell insights with Imric, he left with the caravan. Imric returned to his small snail house with joy, carrying malachite and other cast and experimental materials he had purchased. Malachite is a treasure that can stimulate the spiritual power of low-level mages to deeply touch the magic web. Mages can usually only advance through day after day, year after year of meditation. Whenever meditating, the mage will use their spiritual power to touch the magic web, which is a process of refinement. When your spiritual power is enough to withstand a deeper magic web, you can release even more powerful spells. Of course, the advancement of mages on the path of arcane magic is not that simple. All mages have much higher intelligence than ordinary people, precisely because not only is memorizing spells every day a very laborious task, but also when the level of studying arcane magic reaches a medium to high level, the pressure of the magic web will undergo a qualitative increase. At that time, if a mage wants to quickly advance like in a low ring, they need to rely on their developed intelligence to analyze the floating spell models in each layer of the magic web, and even create their own spells. This can greatly enhance the mage's understanding of the magic web and promote the sublimation of spiritual power. However, even during the low-level period of the 1st to 3rd ring, many mages will be unable to upgrade for life due to insufficient intelligence, or when they want to advance faster, they need the support of some external objects, such as malachite. Malachite is similar to a catalyst that can provide a layer of protection for mages when diving deeper into the magic web, allowing them to have their spiritual power touch the deep web for a longer period of time, thus providing a more lasting exercise for their spiritual power. You should know that the duration and effectiveness of spiritual power in the magic web are exponentially increasing. After 2 years of meditation, Imric has been in contact with the magic web area of the 2nd ring spell quite a few times, but he cannot persist. But with malachite this time, it's different. Imric calmed down for a moment, took out the malachite and held it in his hand, calmly sinking into a dark meditation. As usual, when the spiritual power reached the boundary of the 2nd ring magic net, it encountered resistance. With a slight force from Imric, the tentacles of the spiritual power broke through the deep area of the 1st ring and reached the surface area of the 2nd ring magic net. But in the past, Imric insisted on quitting meditation for less than an hour. With the help of malachite, his spiritual tentacles reached the magic web of the 2nd ring, and Imric felt a green glow enveloping his spiritual periphery. This faint light made him completely unable to feel any pressure in the area of the 2nd ring magic net, so Imric relaxed and allowed his spiritual energy to constantly adapt to the surrounding environment in the 2nd ring magic net. 2 hours later, the peacock in Imric's hand turned into a lump of powder, and his spiritual power in the magic web lost the protection of the green shimmer. However, after 2 hours of honing, Imric's spiritual power has been strengthened to the point where he can freely continue to exist in the 2nd ring magic web, which is proof of advancing to level 3. Imric opened his eyes and felt his spell positions in the underworld. There were 7, 5+2, spells, 6, 4+2, 1st ring spell positions, and 3, 2+1, 2nd ring spell positions. Opening his spell book, Imric transcribed his only 2nd ring spell. Windmill. Into the endless book. In an instant, he felt like he had unlimited access to Windmill. Imric recited a spell and made several magical gestures. Second ring spell. Wind-making technique. In an instant, a strong wind blew in the bedroom, like a typhoon passing by. All the sheets and tables on the bed were blown off the wall. When the spell effect passed, Imric looked at the bedroom with a headache on his face and said, "It's over, I forgot to go out and experiment with the spell." About settings. Due to my laziness, I am too lazy to search for various information, and many settings and place names are set up by myself. Of course, all kinds of spells will still strictly follow the settings. After all, the core content of this book is all kinds of spells. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Supernatural Abilities. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Supernatural Abilities. After tidying up the clutter in the room, Imric grabbed the Endless Book and immersed his spirit in it. The Endless Book grants its holder a spell as a supernatural ability every natural year. As a poor mage lacking a source of spells, Imric sees this as a rare way to acquire new abilities. So far, Imric has been living in the continent of Feren for 2 years. The Book of Endless grants Imric 2 abilities. One is a divine spell called the Moment of the Holy Judgment, which is said to be the ultimate spell from the world angel tribe named Valoran. After being released with a gesture, the caster can designate a target to be immune to all damage for 2.5 seconds and deal a 20-level flame damage to creatures within 30 feet of the surrounding area after 2.5 seconds. Converted to the spell level of the continent of Feren, this spell can reach at least 8 rings, and it is also a source of confidence for Imric to live alone in this dangerous world. The spell that can be unleashed 3 times a day with a 2.5 second invincibility and built-in range damage is priceless for mages. Another supernatural ability is generally more abundant. The one-ring spell Burning Hand. Yes, this ability not only draws spells outside of Fern as a template for supernatural abilities, but also draws spells from the continent of Fern itself. For Imric, who possesses the Endless Book, he will eventually have the ability to unleash all spells infinitely, so the supernatural ability of the Burning Hand is of no use to him. But being able to experience other spells in advance is also good, but he hopes to use the precious opportunity once a year to draw more precious spells like the Moment of the Holy Cutting. After organizing his existing spells and abilities, Imric went to the bathroom to wash himself up and prepared to go to bed to rest. Just as he went to bed, Imric's sensitive hearing heard the noise coming from afar. So Imric got up from the bed again and stood by the small window on the left side of the bedroom, gazing into the distance. The forest in the distance was dimly lit by flames, and the Twilight Forest was located in the north of Banua village. Imric's Mage Tower was located in the south of Banua village. Imric's eyes narrowed slightly, and he calculated for a moment that this distance was probably the entrance to the north of Banua village. Are those goblins causing trouble again? Imric pondered inwardly. Half Moon Village is a small village, and the only professional in the village is the chairman of the village council, Galebe Finn, a level 3 warrior. In the past 2 years, Imric has also had communication with Gel Derby and knows that he is just an ordinary war grandson. 2 years ago, when Imric first crossed over, he encountered the harassing Half Moon Village in the Twilight Forest. Fortunately, the combat power of goblins cannot match that of ordinary adult men. Led by level 3 warriors, and relying on the wooden walls of the village, the residents of Banua village beat the group of goblins back to the forest, crying and shouting. Imric considered it for a moment and decided to go to Banua village to see what happened. Now that he has been promoted to a 3rd level mage, he is extremely lacking in various new spells. He has been craving old John's spell book for a long time. Perhaps we can pick up a leak. Imric couldn't help but feel a surge in his heart. In this world where the vast majority of wild mage relationships are passed down from master to apprentice, each person's recorded spells are easily not shared with outsiders. The vast majority of spell scrolls circulating on the market are also common and popular spells. Therefore, Imric, the ultimate home squatter, never had the opportunity to collect new spells. A year ago, when old John's caravan passed through Imric's mage tower for the first time, Imric proposed to him to exchange spells for gold coins, but he did not receive approval. From then on, he realized that just squatting at home had no chance to learn new spells. So he made up his mind to go out and search for some new spells after being promoted to the second ring mage, whether it was to buy from the mage's holy land, Deep Water City, which his predecessor had visited before, or to adventure and collect corpses. And this time, it's a good opportunity. Imric put on his black wizard robe, collected the endless book into his consciousness space, picked up a sharp dagger and hung it around his waist, reciting a spell in his mouth. With a gesture, he pointed out that his whole body lit up and then faded away. After preparing himself to increase his resistance, Imric walked out of the mage tower and into the stable, pulling out a black horse he had raised. Imric touched the horse's head and said, "Thank you very much, Dobao." Dobao shook his head and sneezed arrogantly upon hearing this. Imric flipped over and mounted his horse, reciting a spell in his mouth. Zero ring trick. Dance light technique. A small amount of light ball condensed in Imric's hand. Imric held the light ball in one hand and drove the bean bun with the other, running along the forest path towards Banua village. Imric's mage tower was about 3.5 miles away from Banua village. In about 20 minutes, Imric arrived at Banua village. As soon as he arrived at the village entrance, he found that the usual guards at the south exit were missing. Imric realized that something had really happened. Imric walked towards the village, and in the distance, there was a loud noise. At this moment, a fierce man wearing heavy armor ran over, and it was the warrior Caro who was greeting Imric in the caravan at that time. "Imric. You happen to be here, we need your help," Caro said anxiously, sweat dripping from his bronze-skinned face. "Calm down, Caro, what happened?" Imric smiled and said to Caro. "Don't mention it. I'm really unlucky. I've never encountered any goblins before when I'm here. Today, a lot of goblins attacked this place, and Finn was still on the front line. I just went back to the tavern and got some flame arrows." Caro raised the arrow bag in his hand. "Lead the way, let's go see what's going on. You should be grateful that I didn't make a scroll today, and all the spell positions are still preserved," Imric said with a smile. Imric thought to himself, let's go check the situation first. Previously, when the goblins attacked the village, they could easily be driven away without the help of the caravan. This time, the situation must be quite complicated. The spells he possesses now cannot completely protect him. Shield spells can only protect magic missiles. If he is cut by a sword, he can only support up to 2 or 3 times, and increasing resistance only slightly enriches his stamina. The only holy moment that can protect oneself on the battlefield can only be used 3 times. If the situation is too anxious, then I'm sorry, my friends. Having made up his mind, Imric followed Caro towards the north exit of the village. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Goblins. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Goblins. Galebe used all his strength to stab the fierce wolf's heart with his sword and kicked away the nearby goblin. He looked up, panting heavily, at the short goblin holding a staff sitting on a fierce wolf in the distance, and his heart couldn't help but chill. The goblins are old enemies of Banua village, but today's situation far exceeds what Galebe has seen in his life. At least 40 to 50 goblins and a dozen ferocious wolves work together in love to attack Banua village. All the credit for this was caused by the goblin sorcerer on the opposite side. Galebe cannot determine the level of the goblin sorcerer on the opposite side, but one thing is certain. It must be stronger than old John. Half an hour ago, this goblin used a 3-ring fireball spell to blast through the wooden gate of Banua village, and the raging flames engulfed 3 guards standing by the door. What's even more terrifying is that after this goblin struck successfully, he never wasted his spells again, but instead sent other goblins and fierce wolves to attack the village. According to old John, even if it's just a level 5 sorcerer, it's just been exposed to the third ring spell. They all have at least 3 level 3 spell positions. That is to say, that terrible flame spell can still be released twice. Galebe couldn't help feeling hopeless. Half Moon Village was a small village, and the only professional was him. Even with the 4th level mage of the caravan, Old John, and the 3rd level warrior, Carol Waters, he was probably not a match for these goblins. Old John. Have you considered it carefully? If we don't use those scrolls, we might not be able to make it through. Galebe shouted at Old John. Old John on the wooden wall looked hesitant and full of pain. He knew that according to the current situation on the battlefield, he had little hope of winning. A large amount of supplies from the caravan are still in the village, including 150 scrolls bought from Imric today, of which 70 are scrolls of magic missiles. If he uses these scrolls, he is confident that he can eliminate most of the goblins. However, Old John is only a hired mage, and the business owners behind the caravan are not easy to get along with. Old John's 5 first ring spell slots and 3 second ring spell slots have been completely depleted today, even his own scroll is basically depleted. A goblin needs at least 2 magic missiles to be completely killed, not to mention those fierce wolves. If Old John uses up all the spell scrolls, he will owe a huge sum of money. As a normal low-level mage, Old John has no ability to earn money by wholesale scrolls like Imric. Not only do ordinary mages practice spells every day, they cannot use new spells by copying them from a spell book. Spells must go through deep learning to be remembered in their minds, and in addition, they must undergo long-term practice to master the release of magic proficiently. Otherwise, mages are prone to failing to cast spells due to lack of focus, or have a poor hit rate, which will consume most of the spell positions. He also needs to reserve at least a portion of his spell slots every day to deal with various unexpected situations. Not to mention that since taking on this job, all his spell slots have to be in standby mode every day, so he is fully prepared for the danger that the caravan encounters. Therefore, these 150 scrolls are a huge sum of money that Old John cannot repay. However, even if most of the goblins were solved, those ferocious wolves, and most importantly, the unknown level of goblin sorcerer. Old John struggled in his heart. A level 5 sorcerer has more spell positions than a level 5 sorcerer. A normal level 5 sorcerer has 2 spell positions, while a level 5 sorcerer has at least 3. If charm value adjustments are added, it may reach 5. Fortunately, looking at the ugly appearance of the short goblin, one can roughly determine that its charm will not be too high. However, based on Old John's experience, the skilled casting gestures and powerful power of the goblin sorcerer who released the fireball spell earlier are likely to have reached level 6. That is to say, it has at least 4 3-ring spell positions. This is enough to have a decisive impact on the battlefield. Just as Old John was making up his mind to send someone back to retrieve the spell scroll, a spell sounded behind him. A magic spell. Magic missiles. 3 crimson spell spheres roared past Old John and hit heavily on the head of a goblin to the left of Galebe. The powerful force field damage lifted the little goblin over and lay on the ground, with more exhalation and less inhalation. Old John turned around and said in surprise, "Imric. Why did you come?" Imric put down the gesture he had just cast, put his hand into the wide black wizard robe, and smiled, saying, "Lucky told me today is my harvest day, so I came." "Old John, do you need my help?" "Of course. But what price do I need to pay?" Old John looked at Imric with caution, as he had already guessed Imric's demands in his heart. "A very small cost, Old John. You just need to lend me a copy of your spell book after the battle is over." Imric looked at Old John happily, knowing that this was an offer that Old John couldn't refuse. Old John gritted his teeth and said, "Deal, but I want to remind you that those spell scrolls cannot be used, and I don't have the money to repay them." Imric walked gently to the front of Old John, analyzed the form on the field, and said without looking back, "No need, I brought a lot myself." Imric took out a bottle filled with fiery red liquid from his pocket, and old John exclaimed in surprise, "Ignite." As Imric recited, he forcefully threw the bottle forward until it reached its highest point, where he reached out and pointed. Second ring spell. Wind-making technique. A strong gust of wind appeared on the battlefield, and the village soldiers quickly inserted their swords into the ground to stabilize their bodies. Relying on the fierce wolf, the goblins also tightly grasped the fierce wolf to prevent themselves from being blown away. The small bottle filled with fiery glue flew towards the location of the goblin sorcerer far away with the help of the wind. The goblin sorcerer quickly prepared to cast a spell to release the scorching rays of the second ring spell, attempting to intercept the unknown liquid from the air. But due to the strong wind, by the time the goblin sorcerer was ready, the bottle had already flown in front of it. 3 fiery red lasers shot from the hands of the goblin sorcerer towards the fiery glue, but unfortunately, the glue ignited when heated, and a strong explosion erupted from the bottle, comparable to the effect caused by fireball magic. The intense flames ignited the body of the goblin sorcerer in front of him, and the wind assisted the fire. The strong wind brought abundant oxygen, making the fiery glue burn even more fiercely. The goblin sorcerer screamed in agony and was thrown to the ground by a fierce wolf who was also ignited in his crotch. After a while, he stopped moving. A 6th-level sorcerer with 3 ring spells was unjustly burned to death. Imric couldn't help but wipe his cold sweat, feeling incredulous at the foolishness of this goblin sorcerer. The goblins around saw everything in front of them and couldn't help but shout, "Great! The high priest is dead! The high priest is dead! Run quickly! If you don't run again, you will be chopped to death by the great ones." Like a domino, the other unnoticed goblins couldn't help but look back when they heard the shout. They didn't even have time to retrieve the body of the goblin sorcerer, so they each fled into the twilight forest. Imric climbed down the wooden wall and released several magic missiles. The crimson missiles flew to the ground before the fleeing goblins could fly, heading towards Galaby. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Harvest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Harvest. Imric, thank you very much. You've been a big help this time. Galaby looked at Imric gratefully and extended his muscular arm in an attempt to embrace him. Imric took a step back and looked at the muscular warrior with disdain. He seemed unaware that his whole body was covered in dust and blood. Galaby awkwardly withdrew his hand and scratched his head, as Imric's gaze made him start paying attention to the dirt all over his body. "Thank you, there's no need. Old John and I have our own agreement, and helping you is just accepting his employment." Imric smiled and said, with a hint of indifference in his eyes. Galaby looked at Imric seriously and shook his head. "No, my friend. Without you, all of us would have died today. Your help is of great significance to me." Imric smiled lightly and did not answer. He paced towards the body of the goblin sorcerer, the charred body emitting heat that kept strangers away. Imric recited a short spell, reached out and pointed, a white laser beam shot out from his hand, forming ice flakes on the body. 0-ring trick. Frost ray. After cooling the body down, Imric crouched down and rummaged for the spoils of war. The power of blazing glue is very strong, and the entire body of the goblin sorcerer has been burnt, and all the clothes and equipment on his body have been destroyed. Fortunately, Imric found several spell scrolls from the goblin sorcerer's body. All spell scrolls are made of fire-resistant materials, so the spell scrolls on the goblin sorcerer's body were spared. Imric picked it up and flipped through it, feeling excited. This old goblin has really exploded a lot of gold coins. These scrolls are: Second ring spell. Healing serious injuries, 3rd ring spell. Talking to the dead, and 2nd ring spell. Whip of sound waves, which belongs exclusively to bards. The magical effect of treating serious injuries, as its name suggests, is a rare nanny skill with high cost. Effectiveness. The magical effect of the deceased's conversation is to awaken a corpse and make it answer your 5 questions. The last spell, the Whip of Soundwaves, is a plastic energy spell that allows the caster to summon a blue force field whip, which can make the animal fearful when struck, or simply use it as a whip, which is quite useless. However, even so, Imric happily accepted the scroll. Although these 3 spells cannot be copied and learned by a normal mage, the so-called limitations do not exist for Imric, who possesses the Endless Book. The only regret is that Imric did not collect the benchmark for the 3rd ring attack spell. Fireball. He has been envious of this spell for a long time. "Old John, should I have the spell book you promised me?" Imric walked back to Old John and said to him with a smile. Old John took out a blue spell book from his pocket and threw it to Imric, feeling displeased. "Here, I'll give you at most 1 day to copy it," he said. Imric tucked the spell book into the spacious black wizard robe and nodded lightly. "I said, shouldn't this great victory be worth celebrating? I suggest we have a bonfire party instead," Carol said excitedly. Imric shook his head and said, "I won't go. I need to go back and rest." Galebe walked up and hooked Imric's shoulder, shouting loudly, "How can we do that? You are our great hero." Imric was eager to check on today's harvest and smiled, saying, "I believe you would have had a great time without me. Where is the owner of the Salia Tavern? I'll stay here tonight." Galebe had no choice but to give up when he saw Imric's insistence, and instead said, "Okay, but I must make the most of my landlord's friendship. What small tavern should I stay in? Come to my house, I'll host tonight." After speaking, he forcefully pulled Imric back to the village. The Jellerby family is the elder of this village, so their house occupies the best position in the whole village. After arriving at the place, Imric put the bean buns in the farm stable behind the house and went upstairs. As soon as he entered the room, Imric eagerly took out Old John's spell book and flipped through it. Old John is truly a level 4 mage who has accumulated years of experience. The spell book records over 20 spells, ranging from magic to the 3 rings. There are 10 spells that Imric has not recorded. Trick. Switch technique, magic trick. 1 ring spell. Greasy spell, colorful ball, defeat enemy machine first, colorful spray, apply oil to the soles of the feet, and magic weapons. 2nd ring spell. 2nd level monster summoning technique. 3 ring spell. Fireball spell. The trick goes without saying, one is to switch on and off a switch without a magic seal, and the other is the means used by rural fraudsters to deceive ignorant people who have never seen magic. 1 ring of magic is quite interesting, not to mention the famous greasy magic. 1 ring of group control magic summons a large amount of oil. Fankakyu is a rare type of 1 ring spell, where the caster can fire a 4-inch diameter energy sphere from any range within 90 feet. The caster can switch between the 5 elements of thermal power, acid, and ice, and each element can create different elemental effects. The damage of Fankai Ball and its diverse damage methods can be said to be the pinnacle of a spell, but unfortunately, each time Fankai Ball casts a spell, it consumes a diamond worth 50 gold coins as the casting material. This destined Fankakyu to be a chicken rib spell that is almost never used by any mage. After all, low-level mages cannot afford it, and high-level mages have better alternatives. Fortunately, Imric, who holds the Endless Book, can be immune to consuming any casting material. He only needs to copy the spell onto the Endless Book and can use this supermodel spell endlessly. The remaining spell to defeat enemy planes first makes the caster's intuition more sensitive. Colorful spraying causes blindness at close range over a large area, and applying oil to the soles of the feet greatly accelerates the caster's movement speed. Magic weapons can enchant the weapon. The 2nd ring magic monster summoning technique can summon an alien creature to serve the caster. The 3-ring fireball spell is undoubtedly the king of cost-effectiveness in the first 3-ring spells, with low casting materials, bat feces, huge damage range, and high flame damage. The only regret is that Imric is still unable to use it. Imric excitedly transcribed all the spells that could be transcribed into the Endless Book, including those 3 scrolls. Fireball and the conversation with the deceased were temporarily kept in the spell book and scrolls. A change of guns and guns, even if Guru Imric wants to have another battle, allowing him to unleash the colorful magic to his heart's content. After packing up his spell book, Imric planned to go to bed when he heard someone knocking on the door. Upon opening the door, I found it to be Old John. "What's up, Old John? I haven't finished copying yet." Imric wanted to keep the spell book and study the spell model of Fireball. Old John waved his hand and said, "I'm not here to retrieve the spell book. I came with a commission to hire you." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Departure. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Departure, The Commission. Imric sat back in his chair, propping his head with one hand and looking at Old John with interest. "Yes, a commission. We would like to hire you to join our caravan and escort this batch of goods to Dragon Blade Castle," said Old John seriously. Imric couldn't help but wonder why Old John had suddenly invited him to join the caravan after passing through this route more than a dozen times. So he asked, "Why did you suddenly invite me?" Old John sighed and said, "We've been walking this trade route for a long time, but it's never been as dangerous as it is today. Our caravan owner has also reached an agreement with some factions in the Twilight Forest, and there is a trade route that can ensure our safety as much as possible. But today's events gave me a premonition that the situation in the forest may change, and we must be prepared." Imric lightly tapped the table with rhythm, lowering his head to contemplate. Now that he has reached level 3 as a mage, he urgently needs a large number of spells to expand his spell book. Half Moon Village, this small village, is completely unable to meet his needs. Now he has 2 options. One is to go south and settle in Buck City, where the caravan set off, or follow the caravan north and cross the Twilight Forest to reach Dragon Blade Castle in Sword Bay. Although going north is certainly dangerous, Old John's caravan has always cooperated with the forces in the forest, ensuring a certain level of security. As long as there is not too much change, it is still worth taking a risk. Taking the risk to go to Dragon Blade Castle naturally has its benefits. To the north of Dragon Blade Castle, passing through Dagger Beach, is the famous Holy Land of Mages, Deepwater City. There is a secure trade route that has been in operation for many years between Dragon Blade Castle and Deepwater City, so whether it is collecting spells or setting out to study in Deepwater City in the future, Dragon Blade Castle is an excellent springboard. Having made up his mind, Imric looked up and said to Old John, "I've taken on this commission, but I need you to agree to one condition. After arriving at Dragon Blade Castle, I hope to find a high-quality residential property in the city. I believe your association should have some real estate resources available for sale to me." Old John waved his hand and said, "There's no problem with that. Besides, I noticed that you can already use the wind-making technique. You should have advanced to level 3 as a mage. As a reward for joining the escort team, I will give you 10 gold coins per day." Imric was non-committal upon hearing this. Although the remuneration was not high, the mage's daily expenses were very high, and there was always something better than nothing. Moreover, his main purpose in joining the caravan was to safely reach the Dragon Blade Castle. After all the discussions were settled, Imric sent Old John away. The next day, Imric rode back to his small wizard tower on a bean bun, ready to pack up his things. Imric put all the precious materials in a package, and also put the toothbrush and towel for washing into his small bag. As he passed by the kitchen, Imric hesitated for a moment and still brought a few dried salted fish. Although the caravan provided food and shelter, there was no guarantee of any unexpected situation. Imric cleaned the bedroom and put all the blankets and pillows in the wardrobe. He silently looked at the cramped dwelling in front of him for 2 years and couldn't help but feel a hint of reluctance, but the unknown expectations and longing for spells made him forget about them. As he left, Imric watered the white rose at the door for the last time, rode on a bean bun, and looked back at the small wizard tower behind him, thinking to himself. Feren, I'm here. When the caravan set off, it was already approaching noon. When Imric arrived, Old John briefly introduced the configuration of the caravan to him. 4th level Mage John, 3rd level Warrior Caro, a 2nd level Wanderer, and 7 unprofessional sword guards. In addition, there are also business staff from 3 chambers of commerce. After entering the Twilight Forest, the speed of the caravan's movement slowed down significantly. According to Old John, the cooperative force of the caravan at the center of the Twilight Forest was a group of Druid sects, with a Druid leader at level 9, who was the most powerful force in the forest. The route of the caravan will not pass through the Druids' camp, but as part of their cooperation, the Druids will ensure the exclusion of most dangerous creatures that threaten the caravan's route. Late at night, the caravan stopped by a stream to rest for a while. Due to the agreement with the Druid, the caravan could not hunt animals in this forest to satisfy their hunger. Therefore, everyone took out their own dry food to satisfy their hunger. Imric sat by the campfire, finished an hour-long focused meditation, and as the moonlight was just right, he decided to take a walk along the small river. Imric walked down the small river and was about to stop and take a bath in the water when suddenly a clicking sound caught his attention. At the same time, a bloody smell also wafted into Imric's nose. Imric was alert and made a mysterious gesture with his hand, applying shield and oiling his feet. He relaxed slightly and continued to listen carefully to the source of the sound. Imric followed the sound and saw a black figure wriggling from a distance. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be an ugly black spider biting at a dead goblin, similar to an ordinary wolf spider, but on a larger scale. It has over a dozen eyes on its face, but unlike ordinary spiders, these eyes look like those of humanoid creatures. Those eyes are symmetrically arranged in 4 rows, with 3 eyes in each row. Its body is covered with long and rough black fur. What's even more terrifying is that it doesn't have the typical spider's mouthparts. Instead, it has a set of fangs. Through these fangs, it uses its teeth like a mammal to tear up the dead goblin and swallow it. Imric walked to a position close to his 90-foot range, and his pale hand reached out from the wide black wizard robe. Imric recited a spell, and a fiery red sphere appeared in Imric's hand. The eerie flames instantly attracted the spider's attention. The black spider let out a roar, and its fear of flames instinctively made it want to escape. However, the tempting flesh and blood beneath it constantly lured it to continue devouring. Imric threw it out with ease, and the flame sphere roared past, accurately hitting the spider's body. Flames burst out from the sphere, burning the ground like burning oil. The roar of the black spider was engulfed by the flames, leaving only the flames to burn quietly under the bright white moonlight. One ring spell. Colorful ball. Flame sculpture. The strength of Fankakyu lies not only in the damage caused by its contemptuous spells, but more importantly, it can temporarily change a small piece of terrain based on its elements. Flame shaping can make the flames under the spider's body burn continuously. This spider attempted to roll and extinguish the flames, but it was only in vain. The continuous burning of the flames eventually caused it to gradually lose its resistance and be burned to a slightly charred black. Imric waited for a few minutes to confirm its death before walking forward and looking at the body of the unknown monster with great interest. With a flick of his hand, a blue arcane hand appeared and picked up the spider's body. Imric returned to the camp with the body. When everyone saw the spider corpse brought back by Imric, they couldn't help but be frightened. Such a detestable appearance is really unacceptable. Old John saw the body and carefully observed it. Suddenly, a cold sweat broke out and he asked loudly, "Where did you see this goblin spider?" Caro walked up and asked, "What's wrong, what's this thing?" Old John said nervously, "This is the goblin spider, a social monster. If you see one, it means there must be a large group nearby. They are natural predators, with huge numbers. If we encounter them, it will be a fierce battle, Imric said with a serious expression. I saw it nearby not far away. It was originally alive, but I killed it. Old John said to Carrot, hey buddy, we need to get ready to leave. It's best to leave overnight. I'm afraid this ghost is the source of change in the forest. Caro listened with a headache and said, the Twilight Forest is so big that it can't be traversed in a day or two. This is simply unrealistic. Does this monster have any weaknesses? Perhaps we can seek help from those druids. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Wood Elves. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Wood Elves. Old John shook his head and sighed, saying, those druids won't let us enter their camp, let alone. He pointed to the spider corpse on the ground and said, goblin spiders are not a species of Twilight Forest. They originally lived in the distant eastern Karatur. The existing spiders in Faelûn are just artificially raised pets. But now, they have appeared in the wild, and with their breeding speed, they are capable of invading the ecosystem of Twilight Forest. I'm afraid the previous goblins were also driven out by these spiders. After hearing this, Imric said to Old John, these spiders seem to be very afraid of fire. Let's make up for the campfire tonight, rest here, and move forward at full speed tomorrow. Since only one spider has been found here, there is no need for us to make a big fuss at the moment, cultivate our vitality, and prepare for possible battles in the future. Caro also agreed upon hearing this, so Old John called the guards of the caravan, ordered them to add firewood, and arranged for an increase in the number of patrols at night to 4 people per shift, taking turns to rest, with wanderers leading the team to pay attention to the situation. Imric returned to his tent and lay in bed wearing a robe. After making sure everything he needed was at hand, he went to sleep. Fortunately, there were no spiders attacking all night. Perhaps it was the flames of the campfire that played a role. After a night of rest, the caravan members also regained their energy and accelerated their departure early in the morning. Those goblin spiders are nocturnal animals. We used to need 3 days to cross the forest, but now with the entire team accelerating during the day, it only takes about 2 days. Imric, prepare your spell position for today, be vigilant tonight, and be fully prepared, Old John said seriously to Imric before setting off. Imric watched as Old John held his spell book, carefully memorizing the spells he had to prepare for today. Helplessly, he also pretended to take out his spell book and read it all the way, pretending to be memorizing the spells. This is also why in the continent of Feren, most people's impression of mages is that they enjoy reading. The more advanced a mage is, the more spell positions they have, so they need to spend time memorizing more spells every day. Sometimes, if they accidentally forget the spells they remember, they will have to memorize them again. So in the eyes of passers-by, those mages are strange people who walk and read spell books all day long. While Imric was pretending to study hard, a battle was taking place in the distant forest. Whoosh! A sharp bow and arrow shot from the tree, accurately piercing through the eyes of a goblin spider. After shooting an arrow, a female wood elf wearing woven grass and rattan clothes jumped down from the tree, and there was a male wood elf covered in scars on the ground. They were surrounded by the bodies of 7 or 8 goblin spiders. The female wooden elf crouched down anxiously and said, "Brother, can you still stand up? We should go now." The male wood elf tried to stand up, but he was so weak that he couldn't support himself. There was a huge bite on his leg, and blood was flowing uncontrollably. He lifted his head and said gently, I'm fine. You go ahead. There shouldn't be these damn monsters here anymore. Go back to the camp and ask for help, don't worry about me. The male wood elf is too weak, even if it's just gathering energy to talk, it keeps coughing. The female wood elf was filled with tears in her eyes and shook her head vigorously. Let's go together. I'll carry you on my back. I won't leave you here, brother. She forcefully supported the male wood elf and carried him on her back. The continuous battles had exhausted her, but she held on to her body and slowly moved forward. The highly focused battle left her brain with a splitting headache, and after walking for an unknown amount of time, everything in front of her began to blur. Finally, she couldn't hold on anymore. A stone tripped her foot and she fell to the ground with a thud. The male wooden elf on her back had already lost consciousness and passed out. She took a deep breath, flipped over her brother on her back, and got up. She placed her trembling hand under her brother's nose, and a faint breath passed through her fingertips. She breathed a sigh of relief and lay exhausted on the muddy ground, squinting her eyes slightly at the sky, muttering to herself, "Take a break for a few seconds, and soon I'll have the strength to stand up again." The voice became increasingly faint, and in the end, the female wood elf also fell into darkness. After an unknown amount of time, the female wood elf was suddenly awakened by a sound. She suddenly opened her eyes vigilantly and struggled to get up. The excellent vision brought by the elf bloodline allowed her to gaze into a dark shadow in the distance. "It's the goblin spider," she counted with pale lips. 9 goblins. She habitually reached out to retrieve the arrow from the quiver behind her, but found it empty. The bow and arrow had already been depleted in the previous battle. She hesitated for a moment, fixed her gaze, threw all the bow and arrow bags on her body onto the ground, turned around, picked up the male wood elf, and ran in the opposite direction. But as she was physically exhausted, she couldn't match the speed of the goblin spider at all, and the distance between the two was getting closer and closer. In the morning, the caravan embarked on the road in the foggy weather, and the road, which had just rained, was muddy. Imric was covered in a wide robe, riding on a dobau, and his eyes, hidden under a wide hood, were vigilant as he observed the surroundings. At this moment, the wandering scout ahead suddenly heard a voice. "Stop! There is movement on the right side." Caro drew his long sword and ordered, "Prepare for battle." A faint rustling sound followed the watchful gaze of the crowd as a figure stumbled out of the grass, a female wood elf with a male wood elf on his back. The female wooden elf saw the caravan in front of her and her eyes flashed with vigilance, but she turned around to look around, gritted her teeth, and continued to run forward, shouting, "Help us, there's a monster behind us." The wanderer appeared on the side of the wooden elf with a dagger in his hand, threatening to drink, "Don't go any further." The wooden elf stood in place, looking helplessly before and after. At this moment, old John walked out and stopped. "Wait a moment, Rick." The wanderer took a few steps back upon hearing this, but remained vigilant as he watched the 2 wooden elves. Old John said to the wooden elf, "Are you from the Druid camp?" The wooden elf nodded anxiously and said, "Help us, I am Ella Green from the Druid camp. This is my brother, Assyrian Green. There are monsters chasing us from behind, and my brother is unconscious. Please help us." Upon hearing this, Imric immediately equipped himself with an enemy fighter, and with the help of his keen insight, he heard voices coming from afar. He nodded at old John and said, "There are signs of a large number of creatures moving in the distance, she's not lying." Ella gratefully glanced at Imric, and old John waved his hand as they walked up to the caravan. Carrot and others continued to hold their troops in readiness. Wanderer Rick ran up the tree and shouted loudly, "Goblin spiders!" 9. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Joining. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Joining. Imric reached out and pointed at the bushes. Greatness. 1 ring spell. Oil technique. A large puddle of brown oily liquid appeared on the ground, and Imric continued to release it, releasing another greasy technique that expanded the area. Old John couldn't help but take a surprised look at Imric, not expecting him to repeatedly record the same precious spell position. Fankai Ball. Imric reached out his hands and released the Fankai Ball twice. Flame Sculpture. 2 fiery red spheres suspended above his hands. Old John looked at Imric in pain and cursed the spendthrift in his heart, spending 100 gold coins to release the spell. I really don't know if he's dedicated or not good at math. If he were to come, this business trip would be in vain. Old John was not idle either, reciting a spell and touching Karos' long sword, bestowing upon him a one-ring spell. A demonized weapon. This spell is used to transform a non-magical weapon into a +1 level magical weapon in a short period of time, and requires the release of no casting materials, making it highly cost-effective. The wanderer hidden in the tree changed to a bow and arrow, shooting a few arrows towards the distance and shouting, "Monster approaching. We're about to break through the bushes." A faint rustling sound erupted, and 4 black goblin spiders rushed out of the grass, slipping and falling to the ground by the prepared greasy technique. The spiders behind were immediately alert and stopped moving forward. Imric saw that they were not fooled, so he had to throw out the 2 colorful balls in his hand. The 2 flame spheres roared past and hit the 2 spiders lying on the oil heavily. The scattered flames ignited the greasy technique on the ground and instantly ignited a big fire. The spiders who fell in the greasy technique fell into a whale, and the 2 spiders that were hit died first. The remaining 2 spiders that were ignited by the greasy technique also struggled in the flames, but the slippery ground made their limbs unable to stand up at all. The remaining 5 spiders saw this scene and roared angrily, bypassing the scope of the greasy spell and rushing towards them like a crowd. Karo went up first and engaged in a fight with a spider, and the remaining guards rushed up to fight against the spiders. After all, Karo is a level 3 warrior who is adept at fighting a monster without spell-like abilities, but the remaining guards are not as strong. Old John watched as a guard was knocked to the ground by a spider and was about to die from the spider's mouth. He quickly cast a spell and released a frost ray. The ability of level 0 magic is not enough to kill this goblin spider, but low magic resistance caused the spider to freeze 1/3 of its body by frost rays. The spider quickly broke free from the ice on its body, but the ground guard had found an opportunity to run away. Imric also did not watch the play, and the guard standing in a group with the monsters could not allow him to support him with colorful balls. Colorful spraying could also cause his teammates to become blind. So he reached out and recited the spell, feeling the call of a distant realm, summoning creatures from another world. Second ring spell. Second level monster summoning technique. A wicked red light flashed past, and a fiery red centipede, similar in size to the goblin spider, appeared in front of Imric, making a hissing sound. Large purgatory mutant centipede. Imric immediately ordered, and the purgatory centipede rushed forward to fight against the spider. With a summon that could only match the level of a level 2 warrior added, the pressure on everyone immediately became much easier. Unfortunately, the monster summoning series can only summon one during its maintenance period. If a new summon is summoned, the old summon will return on the spot. Otherwise, Imric alone could pull up a monster army and crush these spiders. Helpless, Imric had to support himself with magic missiles and frost rays. After Karo killed the spider again, he joined the battle of the guards. In no time, everyone killed all 9 spiders. After the battle, Imric became even more eager to obtain new spells. There are still too few existing spells, and the lack of individual spells is evident in this battle. When the guards are fighting monsters, Imric has no more powerful individual magic than magic missiles to provide support without accidentally damaging the guards. Furthermore, without these guards, even Imric's infinite spell positions would be very dangerous. He has not yet obtained the ability to cast spells instantly, and if there are too many enemies, he will not be able to release enough spells. He was determined that after arriving at Dragon Blade Castle, he must find the opportunity to learn the Lost Step and Mage Armor. The second ring spell. Mistake Step is the most cost-effective life-saving skill of Fae in the early stage. The caster can teleport to any location within 30 feet of their line of sight after making a gesture with one action. The release speed of the Mist Step is very fast, with only one action. Although the range is small, he has unlimited spell positions and can kite others very flexibly after learning it. One ring spell. Mage Armor is also a life-saving skill that allows the caster to have resistance equivalent to armor protection. Although not like shield spells that can directly defend against damage, they can stack and release, greatly enhancing the defense of shield spells. Of course, in Imric's future vision, the best and safest way for him to fight is to use a variety of summoning spells, summoning cheap and powerful summoning items called meat shield in the front row, while he hides behind and bombards wildly. This way, even AoE spells are not afraid to harm allies, as they are undead summoning items. Imric set a small goal in his mind to collect all elemental summoning spells, monster summoning spells, and undead summoning spells. The remaining rare summoning spells are up to luck. At this moment, a commotion nearby interrupted Imric's deep lust. He turned around and saw that it was the brother of the wooden elf Ella, and Assyria woke up. He walked over and happened to hear Assyria say, "We are the personnel arranged by the camp to patrol the caravan route, and ended up encountering these despicable monsters." He still felt a wave of disgust when he mentioned these spiders. Wood elves are elves who love nature and are isolated from the world, unwilling to interact with outsiders. Even chambers of commerce that have trade cooperation with them are not allowed to enter their campsite. The goblin spider, as an invasive species from the Far East, is extremely aggressive and has no natural enemies in the twilight forest. The wood elves, who believe in natural balance, naturally detest these terrifying monsters. We don't know how these monsters came to the twilight forest to breed, but now the Druid camp is on the edge of a cliff, and the balance of nature has been disrupted. The elders in the village hope to receive help from your chamber of commerce. Old John listened to Assyria's words and exchanged glances with Caro, carefully paying attention to their wording. He said, "Your camp has been cooperating with us for a long time, and in order to ensure the stability of this trade route, we are naturally willing to help. But we have goods with us now, and as you can see, our caravan strength is not high." He looked at the dim eyes of the two wooden elves and gritted his teeth, saying, "All right, come with us to Dragon Blade Castle. I will take you to see the boss of our Chamber of Commerce. As long as you convince them, they can send more mercenaries to help you." Upon hearing this, Ella and Assyria couldn't help but brighten their eyes and quickly agreed. So the caravan took a brief rest and continued on its journey. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Druid Divine Arts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Druid Divine Arts. Late at night, the caravan stopped to rest again, and everyone piled up bonfires one by one, preparing to spend the last night in the twilight forest. Ella is currently taking care of her brother Assyria in the tent. The male wood elf's injuries are very serious, and even if the blood is temporarily stopped, he can hardly move. Imric stood outside the tent quietly watching everything, and from the moment he saw Assyria, he knew he was a druid, but he didn't know his class level. In the world of Fallon, every spellcaster profession can create their own faction of spell scrolls, requiring only basic scroll materials and powder ground from magic crystals. But among all factions, only mages can copy and learn spells through the models on the spell scroll, and mages can only learn arcane spells through this ability. But Imric is different. With the Endless Book, he can copy spells from all factions, including the Druid's natural magic. Druids are a group of people who believe in the will of nature, practicing it in an attempt to bring balance to all things. Druids exist like priests, but they do not believe in any gods, they only believe in nature itself. Therefore, the Druid's natural spell list has spells that are not found in many priest spell lists. Imric had already learned the healing skills of a priest from a goblin sorcerer before this, and at this time, Assyria was seriously injured and urgently needed his help. He examined the situation and decided to explore it, so he coughed lightly and caught Ella's attention. Ella turned around and saw Imric, wondering, "Mage, what's up?" Imric looked at Ella with a smile and said, "Your brother is seriously injured, isn't he? We have to rush for a day tomorrow. If we don't get treatment soon, we may leave some sequelae." Ella sighed and said, "We don't have healing scrolls for magic, and there's no priest here. I know his injuries are serious, and I'm worried too. But I can't do anything about it." As she spoke, Ella covered her face and began to cry. Imric squatted down lightly and grabbed the back of Ella's hand, which could bring the stranger closer. He said, "Don't worry, I can treat him." Ella looked up at him and said with tears in her eyes, "Really? Please help me, I'll agree to any requests." Imric smiled and said, "Of course he can be healed. I am not only a mage, but also a part-time pastor. Treating a serious injury can help his condition recover. However, I hope to have some Druid spell scrolls. As someone with a collection obsession, I enjoy collecting spell scrolls from various professions. So, I hope you can give me all his spell scrolls and promise me that when he wakes up, he will copy all the spell scrolls he has mastered, and of course, I can provide the materials." Ella nodded fiercely and said, "Of course. No problem, you've been a big help to us. I'll agree to such a small request on my brother's behalf." Imric stood up satisfied and reached his hand over Assyria's head, praying for the protection of the gods in his mouth, healing serious injuries. Second ring divine technique. Healing serious injuries. A gentle white light enveloped Assyria's entire body and soon stopped. At this moment, all the small scars on Assyria's body had disappeared, and the huge wound on his chest had scabbed. Assyria opened his eyes and his pale face showed a hint of blood. He looked at Imric in confusion and then asked Ella, "What's wrong with me? I feel the aura of magic." Ella explained the situation to him earlier, and Assyria gratefully said to Imric, "Thank you for your help. This is the magic scroll on my body, and I will copy the remaining magic for you in the next 2 days. Your help cannot be repaid by these spell scrolls. I, Assyrian Green Forest, swear in the name of the way of nature that I will find an opportunity to repay you in the future." As he spoke, Assyria took out 3 spell scrolls from the backpack beside him. Imric smiled and waved his hand. He had no idea that any spell in Imric's hand would be incredibly powerful. Smart as Imric, how could he do a loss-making business? "Don't worry, the magic scroll you copied is the greatest reward for me. If you really can't bear it, then give me some more scrolls in the future." Imric blinked and said. After chatting a few more words, Imric returned to his tent with 3 spell scrolls. As soon as he entered the room, he couldn't wait to spread out 3 spell scrolls and take a look. 1 Ring of Divine Arts. Falcon's Eye. The second ring divine technique. The Web of Thorns, mastered by the sky. The Falcon's Eye significantly increases the caster's long-range ability and increases the accuracy of archery. The second ring divine spell, Thorn's Web, is an AoE spell that can cause grass, shrubs, and even trees to grow thorns and entangle or enter the range of creatures. The spell area becomes an obstacle terrain, and creatures entering it will be hindered in movement and suffer piercing damage. However, creatures with the effect of the Move Freely spell or those with the characteristic of trekking will not be affected by this spell. The last spell, Sky Mastery, caught Imric's eye as it allowed the caster to grow feathered or bat wings without substance. The caster's flying speed is 90 feet, with superior flexibility. Most importantly, during the duration of the spell, it does not affect the caster's ability to release any other spells. With this spell, Imric can be said to pose no threat to goblin spiders, which cannot fly and have no spell-like abilities. After transcribing all the spells, Imric went outside the tent and added a falcon eye to test its effect. A spell of radiance flashed by, and Imric's vision suddenly improved a lot. Even in the dark, he could see far away. He walked to the boundary of the camp and looked into the distance. Suddenly, he saw clusters of black shadows running towards him. His pupils trembled. It was a goblin spider. There are at least 20 of them. He quickly ran back to the camp and shouted, "Prepare for battle. Enemy attack. A large number of goblin spiders are coming." Upon hearing this, everyone quickly stood up. Imric tore open the scroll he had mastered in the sky and recited a spell loudly. A pair of feathered wings spread out from behind him, and he flew into the air. Imric flew to the east side of the camp and released 3 greasy spells in a row. He was preparing to repeat his old skill and use the greasy spell with flames to clear the first wave of monsters. After releasing the greasy spell, he started singing loudly again. Second ring spell. Second level monster summoning technique. A large purgatory centipede was summoned by Imric. The purgatory centipede is not afraid of flames, and it does not trip over greasy techniques. They themselves walk on the ground. He dispatched the purgatory centipede to climb to the greasy area, extended his hands, and summoned 2 colorful balls. Flame charge. The rest of the crowd stood ready to fight to the death after the first wave of monsters broke through the greasy magic defense line. Old John took out a pinch of red, yellow, and blue powder and stood at the front line of the crowd, preparing to throw a rainbow spray of blinding spiders before the spiders approached, and then retreated to the back. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Battle and Arrival. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Battle and Arrival. Imric flew in the air and first threw 2 balls of flame and colorful balls over, accurately hitting the 2 unlucky individuals in the spider swarm. The intense flames ignited 2 goblin spiders in an instant, and the terrain features created by the colorful ball also ignited a raging fire around the 2 spiders. The 2 spiders behind did not have time to dodge, and one of them broke into 2 large fires. As the howling sounded, 4 spiders died in the colorful balls of a damaged spell deck. After seeing the flames retreat, the remaining spiders continued to charge towards the caravan, but to their surprise, 3 groups of greasy spells were waiting for them ahead. As at least 7 spiders fell into the greasy spell in the first wave, Imric chanted the spell 3 times and threw 3 colorful balls in a row. Flame sculpture. Bang bang. The greasy technique and the colorful ball produced an extremely powerful chemical reaction, and the raging flames engulfed 7 goblin spiders among them. The remaining monsters had already changed their direction when they saw the greasy trap and charged towards the crowd from the side. Old John picked up the tricolor powder and sprinkled it into the sky. The magnificent color light scattered forward from his fingers, forming a cone-shaped area. As nocturnal animals that live in the dark for a long time, intense light is their archenemy, not to mention the blinding and deterrent effects of the colorful jet. When the first few spiders were immediately illuminated by the colorful light, their pitiful spell resistance made them completely unable to resist. Not only were they blinded by the colorful spray, but they were also stunned and unable to move in place. Old John immediately retreated to the back after a successful strike. After all, he didn't have the flying spell of Imric. Caro saw the situation and had an unstoppable opportunity, leading the guards to charge towards the spiders. Several spiders that were intimidated in place were cut to death one by one. Imric flew in the air, with an extremely wide field of vision. He recited the spell again and performed the same technique again, releasing the colorful ball. Thundering charge. The sizzling sound of electric current resounds inside the white light sphere, which is charged by the sound element of the colorful sphere, which can inflict powerful sound damage on enemies and fly them away. Imric saw a spider being knocked down by Caro and shouted, "Stay away, Caro." He smashed the ball in his hand fiercely towards the ground, creating a compressed shape in his palm. The thundering colorful ball instantly hit 2 spiders, and a powerful sound wave spread out, shattering the developed auditory system of nearby spiders. It then flew the 2 spiders far away and fiercely hit the big tree. Caro got free time and went to help other high-pressure guards. Seeing that the remaining spiders were not enough to fear, Imric and Old John occasionally used frost rays to support the other guards. The battle came to an end as the last spider was frozen in place by Imric and Old John, unable to move, and was chopped to death by Carrot. Imric flew down from the sky, and Old John ran over and patted Imric's shoulder. He sighed and said, "It's thanks to you tonight, Imric." "Hey, I." Halfway through his words, he couldn't continue. He couldn't understand Imric's spell of 50 gold coins each, spreading it out like he didn't want any money. Imric was at least 300 gold coins worse tonight. On the other hand, he released frost rays like a salted fish paddling beside him. But this is the normal operation of a low-level mage. Old John thought to himself in confusion. He was blinded by Imric's inhumane money ability, unaware that all spells had no restrictions on casting materials for Imric. Imric also understood what old John was thinking. He, who used to be an ordinary low-level mage, understood the pain points of low-level mage battles. The battle ended, and everyone continued to rest in place overnight. The next morning, they reorganized and set off. In the afternoon, everyone's caravan finally walked out of the twilight forest and arrived at Dragonblade Castle. After entering the city, Imric said goodbye to old John and the two of them agreed to meet tomorrow to discuss real estate matters in detail. Assyria and Ella decided to follow old John to meet with the boss of the Chamber of Commerce. Before leaving, they handed the copied scroll of divine spells to Imric. Open a suite. Imric, covered in a black wizard robe, walked into a tavern and as soon as he entered, he took out a gold coin and threw it to the half-bodied bartender. The short half-figure took the gold coin into his mouth and bit it, squinting his eyes to look at Imric. Ah, esteemed Master Mage, we have 3 different types of suites here, namely Mediterranean style, downhill mystery, and couple suite. Which one do you want? Said the half-figure flatteringly to Imric. A mysterious mage is rare even in Dragonblade Castle, which is more developed than Xionglu City, let alone in places like taverns where fish and dragons mix together. Imric smiled and said, the Mediterranean style is great. I like tropical climate. Also, please help me bring a steak and fish to my house. After speaking, Imric sat down and took out another gold coin. He held it between his fingers and looked at the half-figure, saying, Can you introduce me to the Dragonblade Castle? It would be best if you could provide news worth 1 gold coin, half-figure. The short bartender made an exaggerated expression and gesture, and loudly said, Of course, my dear mage master, Oat is the most informed bartender in this city, and I promise not to disappoint you. Where do you want to start? Imric thought for a moment and asked, Let me know the distribution of power in this city first, and if I want to buy some spell materials and supplies, where should I go? Half-Life Oat heard this and said, You asked me the right person. Dragonblade Castle is divided into Inner City District and Outer City District. Our area belongs to the Southern Outer City District, and the biggest force in the Outer City District is the Thief Guild. The Inner City District is the gathering place for the city government and aristocratic elders. As for the magical materials and supplies, we don't know what they are, but a wizard like you would go to Wakisi's magic shop. Perhaps you can go there and take a look. Imric nodded in satisfaction and threw a gold coin into the hand of the half-man. He was about to get up and return to his room when a strong man's wine suddenly spilled on him. He turned around and saw that it was 2 drunken people arguing. He looked at the drunkard with displeasure. Unexpectedly, the drunkard dared to shout at him when he saw him wearing a wizard robe, What are you looking at? Damn it, you coward. Believe it or not, I dug your eyes. The drunkard across from him saw that Imric was wearing a wizard robe, and his pupils trembled. He quickly ran to the side, gloating as he watched the other person perform unconsciously. Imric smiled and said, I don't know if you'll dig out my eyes, but I know that it's better for a fool like you to have eyes that don't grow and can't even see clearly when you offend someone. Why don't you just go blind? The drunkard across from him was furious upon hearing this and raised his fist, ready to hit Imric. Imric's lips twitched slightly, and he reached out his palm like an eagle's claw to look into the eyes of the man across from him. A magnificent burst of colorful light shot out of Imric's hand, and those around him who didn't have time to close their eyes covered their eyes and cried. The closest drunkard in front of him was directly stimulated by the light and shed tears and blood. 1 ring spell. Colorful spray. Looking at the drunkard who was stunned and unable to move even in pain, Imric placed his hand on top of his head and said, Trembling electric shock. 0 ring trick. Trembling electric shock, a tiny electric current passes through Imric's hand, causing the trembling drunkard's body to uncontrollably fall to the ground. A wave of feces and urine emanates from his pants. Imric looked at him in disgust and walked over his body towards the room. He couldn't wait to check the scroll of divine spells given to him by Assyria. The scum that affected his mood, not killing him on the spot, was already the greatest gift. However, as an ordinary person with no magical resistance, he was probably blinded by the close-range colorful jet of light. End of this chapter.